with that said, I want to move on here and talk about gold for a second. And you might be thinking, Jebb, gold is not a cryptocurrency. Gold is, in fact, the opposite of a cryptocurrency. But here's the thing. Gold, and I'll be looking at the GLD by the SPDR Trust right here on the technical analysis for today. Gold is very important because gold is the alpha version of, and I don't mean alpha as in the bigger version, I mean alpha as in the first version of Bitcoin. Why does gold have value? Let's start there. Gold has value because of its salability over time. Now let's break that down. What is salability? Salability is the ability to retain value. That is essentially what salability is. Retaining value. And salability over time means retaining value over time. So what we want to see is our currency retain value into the future. There's a big problem with the US dollar right now, and that is we print so much of it that inflation happens. I always use this example. You remember 10 years ago when the $5 footlong was a thing at Subway? How much does a footlong sandwich cost now? $8? $9, that's inflation. That's what that is. With how much technology is advancing, with how much more efficient supply chains have been becoming, if it weren't for inflation, a $5 footlong would probably cost $4.50 now.
Go look at the McDonald's dollar menu. It's gone.
The dollar menu doesn't exist. It's the $3 menu.
Yeah.
You guys who are a little bit older, you remember the 99-cent store? You can't get a pack of bubble gum for 99 cents anymore. Yeah. That's inflation. And by the way, you don't necessarily make more money with inflation. Smay was telling us the other day, his dad's been working at the same job for 20 years and has not had a raise having to do with inflation. A lot of times prices go up and our pay stays the same. Inflation is a big problem, and it only happens because we do not have the US dollar backed by something that retains its value over time. Remember when we went off the gold standard in 1971? Inflation was occurring before that. Why? Because we technically went off the gold standard. Nixon took us off the gold standard in 71. We started going off the gold standard 100 years earlier after the Civil War, because the U.S. government stopped allowing you to redeem your dollars in gold at certain times. Gold was confiscated during the Great Depression. We saw gold not being able to be redeemed, U.S. dollars being able to be redeemed in gold during the First World War. We started going away from the gold standard much earlier than 1971. People don't realize that. Inflation started because we sacrificed the gold standard for building an economy on the back of debt. National debt right now in America is $25 trillion. Global debt is in the hundreds of trillions. We have built our entire modern society on a bubble. That bubble pops eventually. And when it does, society as we know it collapses. Now, luckily, we've gotten very good at managing it. And I don't say that in a way to try and get you scared. That's just the fact of the matter. Go study the Roman Empire. They built their entire society on the back of debt, and as soon as too many things started pricking at that bubble, it popped and the whole thing fell apart. Rome didn't fall because the Gauls invaded. Rome didn't fall because because I'm forgetting the name of the faction that invaded them, but because the barbarians invaded. Rome has 700. No. Carthage was defeated in the 300s, the 300 BC. I'm talking about 373 when it started to fall. No. It's okay. No. Don't. Stop, Say. Rome didn't fall because it was invaded. Rome fell because they debased their currency and they started clipping the amount of silver and gold content in their coins and built their entire society on debt. That's why it fell. And then because they were weak, other outside factors attacked. Now, everybody thinks that they fell because of a famine and because of the barbarians invading. That is not why they fell. They fell because they debased their currency. That's what we're doing. So tying all this back, why are we interested in gold? Because gold was the way that the U.S. dollar retained its salability over time. When the U.S. dollar was redeemable in gold and the U.S. dollar was backed by gold and all other sovereign currencies were backed by either gold or silver, they didn't have massive inflation. There was no issue with building a society on the back of debt. You notice how in the 1700s, wars were very small. And then the 1900s come around and wars get massive. Why is that? Because in the 1700s, in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, in the Renaissance, kings had to fund their army by raising taxes. They didn't have the ability to print money to fund an army. They didn't. If they raised their taxes too high, everybody would rebel. Now, we're raising taxes still, but the way that we get taxed is really not by a 40% income tax for $400,000 earners. It's from the inflation that we see every single year. Wars got bigger, and society grew because of that debt. But there's a problem in that. That bubble pops eventually, and it debases our currency and it steals your value. Gold is invaluable because of that, but Bitcoin is the new gold, and Bitcoin is taking the place of gold. And that is why I think that this drop that we've seen over the weekend in gold is important. Notice gold dropped 5% in 4 days. That is a lot of volatility. You don't see that too often on gold. Now, we've seen a lot of volatility in the last year and a half on gold, but generally speaking, you don't see that big of a dip. It is somewhat rare. But in the same time, the last 4 days, what has Bitcoin done? Bitcoin has rallied. How much? In the last 6 days, we've rallied 20%. Gold's dropped 20%, Bitcoin's up 20%. What does this tell us? in my opinion, this is not the reason for this rally, but it does remind us of something, and that is that Bitcoin is the new gold. Bitcoin retains value into the future. It has a limited supply. If the entire world was built on the back of Bitcoin, we wouldn't have a debt bubble right now. We wouldn't have something that's at risk of popping. Think about it like this. Build a city on a waterbed. What happens if you deflate that waterbed? What happens if you let all the water out? The whole city falls apart and the foundations crumble and the whole thing dies. That is our society right now. There's a reason I'm passionate about this, because a lot of people talk about, oh, what are we doing to our kids? The next generation is going to have to pay for this. And that's true. But what about our generation as well? We're having to pay for this right now. Inflation is a silent killer. Every year when there's 2% inflation, you know what that is? That's an extra 2% tax on you. You might not realize this. You might be in a 15% tax bracket. Every time there's inflation, you get an extra 2% because of that. In fact, it's even more than that. We've seen almost 50% inflation as far as the currency is concerned, as far as the currency supply is concerned over the last 18 months. That hasn't impacted prices that much yet, but it's going to, and it's going to affect you in a big way. Gold going down, Bitcoin going up is a major reason that we should be reminded that Bitcoin is the future. So we're talking about the short term in the beginning of this stream, and now we're talking about the long term. The long term of Bitcoin is incredibly strong because every society that has ever succeeded for the long run has built their currency on the back of something solid. And when they stopped, within a couple hundred years, they fell. Rome started debasing their currency 300 years before they fell. It takes time. I'm not saying that this is even going to happen in our lifetime, but it is, in fact, it is affecting us right now. At some point, this has got to end. At some point, we get hit by too many things at once, like a pandemic, and then we have that waterbed deflate and the foundations crumble. When does that happen? Does it happen in our lifetime or our kids? I don't care. The point is, it's going to happen eventually. And Bitcoin is not only the best solution, it is the only solution. So buy Bitcoin, hold it, and don't let anybody scare you into selling it because you will regret it.